Hi, welcome back to the Creative Industry Insight podcast, a podcast that takes a look at various roles in the creative world. I'm your host, Bobby. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode with Dom as we did a deep dive into the SFX world. This week, we're looking at hair and makeup design. Today's guest is the super talented Naomi Donne, a BAFTA and Oscar nominated hair and makeup designer whose credits include 1917, Zoolander, and Overlord. So make yourself comfortable as we jump into the conversation with Naomi. Good afternoon, Naomi. How's it all going?
All right, Bobby.
Oh, thank you very much. That's still
How's it go? How are you?
I'm good. It feels a bit odd having so much sort of time off to recharge the batteries, and everything's so up in the air, but it's still sort of exciting time to sort of do things that I've been putting off for so many years. Cleared out all my room, the stuff that I was just like, I don't even know why I still have this. It's good. Like, I know it sounds bad to say, but I kind of enjoyed the time off. I do want to go back to work soon.
I love being in lockdown. I love it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a terrible reason, but it's a great way to. I mean, it's just stopping is so fantastic.
It is a really bad reason, and it is sort of kind of selfish to say, but at the same time, it's important to look after yourself, and especially now where everything's sort of go. It's been nice to have that.
Also, I think a lot of people feel that.
Yeah, even like one of my friends
stop their life.
Yeah, well, even one of my friends who has 2 kids, he said that it's just nice to actually get on with spending time with them and not worrying about like I've got 2 days on the weekend to sort of
fit it all in.
He's set up himself a nice little bar in his garden.
So
I kind of look forward to that once it sort of all dies down, but let's see what happens. So I guess it would be a good segue to start to go into everything. Before I start talking about all the sort of amazing projects that you worked on, I want to go back to the beginning, because I watched a video where you had the ambition of going on to Doctor Who, and it kind of hit you that you wanted to get into hair and makeup. How did that journey begin?
Well, I didn't know if being a makeup artist was actually a real job, a real profession. Because as you probably heard when you listened to that interview, when I started as a makeup artist, there weren't celebrity makeup artists. It wasn't the same type of job. I didn't have quite the same opportunities or visibility that there is now. And so I didn't know if it actually was a job that I could earn a living at. But then we found out that the BBC had a makeup department and a training school. But you need a degree or alternative qualifications to get in. They were quite demanding. So I went off to the London College of Fashion and got myself my City and Guilds, it was then. Now it's a degree course, but then it was City and Guilds. I went and got my qualifications, and actually it was an incredible experience. It was very different. It was very comprehensive. It covered a huge range of subjects apart from hair and makeup, barbering, beauty therapy, cosmetic science, languages. It was a massively fantastic course. And so I felt quite prepared. It was a very good training background to start as a makeup artist at the BBC, and I managed to get in to the BBC, which is really hard. It was really hard then to get into their school. They had 1,000 applicants for every place. They only had 12 places. So I just got in. It was a miracle. And then it was another 2 years as a trainee. So I had 5 years of training as a makeup artist, which probably was the best thing that could have happened, because when you're very well trained, you're confident enough to get out there and do it.
Because you had so many years of training, did that sort of drive of knowing that like this is what I want to do help you with sort of the application forms and the interview process?
I think when you're desperate and passionate about doing a job, I think whatever you need to do to fulfill that need is fine. It's none of it was difficult. It was demanding, but it was a means to an end. And yes, from that point of view, it does propel you through. But it's also that when you really want to do something, you want to learn as much as possible about what you want to do. You want to be the best you can be. So all of that education was valuable and necessary so that I could be a good makeup artist.
With 5 years of training, what things do you learn in terms of, I understand you mentioned the sort of the prosthetics, makeup, the barbershop school as well. What was your favourite part as well in the 5 years of training?
I think, well, I have really fond memories of college and all the stuff I learned, but I think once I got to the BBC, I really felt that I was starting my career. And even though we were trainees for 2 years, there were moments where we were allowed to powder someone's nose, or it was very slow. It was very formal, the training, and you had to wash sponges and powder puffs for years. And then one day they said, you can make up Neil Kinnock, who was then the leader of the Labour Party, a very colourful character. And he was effing and blinding. I couldn't believe that politicians swore. And I went home to my mum and I said, you won't believe what Neil Kinnock said today. And I can't even repeat what he said. It was that bad.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. But he was nice. But the idea of making some up was so nerve-wracking at the BBC to go on a party political broadcast or something. But it was great. It was very, very exciting. You never think so much can go wrong from powdering someone's hooter.
When you kind of first powdered somebody's nose, done their makeup for their appearance on TV, did you stand by any of the screens to sort of watch it back, or did you ever get nervous being like, I hope they like this, or was there like a sense of dread being like, please don't let anything go wrong?
It was all of those things, I think. And you do stand by the screens, but when you're a sort of very low down the pecking order and you're allowed to make up some of the background, and you're working for a sort of heavy duty makeup supervisor who's very, very strict, and the BBC were very exacting about what they wanted, and it was all nerve-wracking. Yeah, very nerve-wracking. You had a lot of people to answer to.
I'm guessing back then a lot of people were a little bit more ruled with an iron fist compared to now, where it's
very much so. I mean, the makeup supervisors were mostly terrifying people, and they were like headmistresses. And you had to wear a uniform at the BBC. You had to wear a stripy smock, and you were supposed to wear sort of flat shoes, but no one did. We all wore stilettos, and you had to have your hair tied. I think you had to have your hair tied back, and they were really strict about your appearance. And you had to be very well turned out.
On top of doing the makeup and everything, what other practical skills did you have to sort of pick up whilst looking after people?
Well, I'd picked up a lot of skills in my 5 years of training. So, but once you're there, they start training you how to behave on set, and once you're shooting or once you're whatever you're doing at the Beeb. And the thing that Beeb covered then a huge range of subjects. And from, we had to do the news, we had to do the weathermen, everyone on telly has to get made up. So, but we also had period dramas and sitcoms and sketch shows and films on location. So it was the best possible experience because you really covered everything. We had to do prosthetics, we had to do wigs, we had to do haircuts, we had to do absolutely everything. So it was an amazing training. And the fact that you were in a sort of hierarchy, there was a pecking order, and you had to answer to someone, does give you a sort of discipline that stays with me today about how you are on set or how you treat your team. And it's also a lesson on how to treat the people that are working with you or how not to treat the people that are working with you. And I'm not formal in any way, the way people were then, not at all. But I still want certain things. I still want people to be well turned out and look great and take care of actors properly, apart from doing their job and being well trained and being nice. A lot of the stuff I learned at the BBC I have carried with me.
What I wanted to bring up as well is when you have your team and create a sort of working atmosphere, what is important when you're hiring people? What do you look for them to bring to your team? And what's the sort of thing that stands out to you as well?
Well, I look for people who are committed to being a makeup artist as a serious career, not someone who's done a very expensive 3-month course and thinks that they can go and work on a major motion picture as a makeup artist. So I think I want people who realise that to be a makeup artist takes a lot of training and a lot of experience, and that, often you do get a lot of people that have come out of these courses and think they're ready, whereas doing those courses is step one in a long, long haul to becoming a really well-qualified makeup artist. And so I look for people who are really willing to take on that haul and keep educating themselves and keep training and doing everything possible to learn as much as they can about what we do. And I want people who are team players, who are fun, who take it seriously but not too seriously, who are very committed and very passionate. And although I always tell people, when I get all these letters that say, I'm very passionate about what I want to do, and I keep telling people not to write that, because everybody writes that. So it's a bit of a cliche. But then a cliche is really a statement of a truth, isn't it? So that's what I'm looking for.
Once you finished your 5 years of training, did you continue going on to courses? And how did you sort of still hone your skills even today?
Well, at the BBC, when you become a makeup artist, or when you're in the makeup department, there's a lot of sitting around. If you're not allocated to a program, you sit in an area where you're standing by in case someone needs something. And during that time where you're sort of waiting around, some of the supervisors would come down and do lessons, or they would ask what you felt you needed to brush up on. And then they'd teach you, and then you could practice and practice. So the whole time I was at the Beeb, which was around 7 years, I was honing my skill with people that knew how to do it better than I did. And since then, what I do is watch other people, or I talk to other people. Or even the other day, I was talking to another makeup artist. I had a problem with some wig stuff, and I said, I was asking her for some help, for some advice. And so it never ends. You're always learning, always ways of improving.
When dealing with wigs and prosthetics, do you usually take the lead on that, or do you bring somebody else in to sort of help out?
No, I do wigs. I only do prosthetics in a very basic way, so that when there's a big prosthetic makeup to be done, I will hire a prosthetic designer, makeup designer, but work together on whatever we're doing, so that I have a sort of say in the design concept, or give notes, or just to have a conversation, or I really want to be a part of all of that. And so I work with people that I've worked with a lot. I tend to do that anyway, and people I trust, and that's how it works with wigs. I do wigs. If I'm doing a show with a lot of wigs, I'll have the wigs made. I always go to the same wig maker, Peter Owen, who's I think is the best in the world. And we spend a long time technically discussing what's needed from a wig, and then we get them all made. And obviously I can't do every single wig on a show, so I have a crew who will take over all of that and run with it.
How long were you at the BBC for, and then did you move into freelancing afterwards?
I was at the Beeb for about 6 or 7 years, and then I left because Tracy Ullman, do you know who I mean?
Tracy Ullman.
Yeah, was having a singing career and was going around the world with her hit single, and asked me to go with and make her up. We'd worked together a lot. We'd done this series called Three of a Kind with her and Lenny Henry and David Copperfield. And I'd made her up on that. So she said, would I come and do that? And I wanted to leave the Beeb. I wanted to go freelance. I didn't know where it was going to lead. But this was enough work to tide me over and get me going. So I did, and also really fond of Tracy Ullman. Really loved working with her. So I left the Beeb, and we went around the world, and we did all that. And then she got offered a small film for Channel 4, which I did. Then the producer of that film offered me a feature film. So I left the BBC because they told me they would never promote me to a designer or a supervisor because I wasn't quite BBC material. And so I left because there was nowhere else I could go at the Beeb, and I was frustrated. So I was waiting for an opportunity to leave, and then I left. And then, within months, I was designing a feature film, which was called The Doctor and the Devils, and starred Timothy Dalton. And then after that, I did some comic strip films, which were, do you know who I mean, the comic strip? They were like Jennifer Saunders and Dawn French and Ade Edmonds and Rick Mayall and all of that lot were making 1-hour films, comedy films for Channel 4. So I worked with them. And when I was doing that, working with them, who I still work with, all those half those people, Tim Dalton was announced as the next Bond. And I was in my 20s then, and I went, oh, wouldn't it be good if Tim rings me up to be his makeup artist when he's James Bond, for a joke? I said that for a joke. I didn't even think there was such a thing as a personal makeup artist. And that night the phone rang, and it it was the producer of Bond saying, could I come in for an interview? Tim wanted me to do his makeup. So I couldn't believe it. So I went in, had my interview, got the job, and there we go. I was doing a Bond. That was my second film I ever worked on. It was so exciting that I put the theme tune on my answer machine, because you had answer machines then. I put the Bond theme tune on, and I went, the name's Donne. I had that on there for years. I'd put it on now if I was doing a Bond. It's so amazing doing a Bond.
Was that quite a surreal moment, though, when you kind of do joke about it and then you come back in, and I'm assuming Albert Broccoli called you?
It was actually Tony Way, who was the line producer.
Oh, I know Tony.
And then when I went in, I met Barbara Broccoli and Cubby and everybody. And they'd never seen a female makeup artist before, because in film, all of the makeup artists were men. And in television, they're all women. And we were all leaving television, flooding the film market. So it was quite a moment, in fact, when people go talk about opportunities for women and in the film industry, we never talk about that. I keep forgetting to talk about the fact that all of us girls from the Beeb came and made our way in a totally 100% male environment. There were no female makeup artists until we left the BBC. And now it's mostly women designing films. There are obviously men designing films, but there are far more women doing it. And it's quite something, I think, that is.
How would you prepare for such a big interview like that, knowing that it is quite a life-changing sort of moment?
You can't really prepare, because they didn't give me a script. No one, in those days, you didn't get a script before you went for an interview. Now, they send you the script and hope that you'll like it and you'll go for an interview. I mean, for everybody, I'm not talking about just myself. Then they didn't. So I couldn't prepare for it. I'd seen a lot of Bonds, so we all knew, I knew what a Bond involved visually. But again, it was only to make Timothy Dalton up, not the whole lot. So I just went in. I just put on a suit and then I went. That's how I prepared.
When you look after artists themselves rather than designing, do you get a say on how their final look is going to be?
Yes, you do, because you're making them up and doing their hair. But you do obviously collaborate with the designer so that you're in the same world as them. And, I phoned recently, I did Emma Thompson in, what was it called?
Cruella.
Yeah. Sorry, senior moment. In Cruella, and Nadia Stacey was designing the film. So we had a meeting, and I said to what do you want me to do? How do you want it to look? What are your design concepts? And so she told me all of that, and she gave me some reference that the director had picked as far as a reference for Emma. And she gave me a load of reference, and I did a whole load more, and I showed her what my designs were and make sure she liked them. And she did. And then I just took off with it. So in a sense, I did design it myself, but influenced by her designs already. So it was a bit wild. It was fantastic, actually.
Because you were a makeup designer on, for lack of a better term, sort of a smaller film, and then you've gone to a bigger film. Do you still want to sort of maybe do a smaller film to continue a designer, or stay on as a makeup artist and something bigger?
I've only ever designed. I've never been a makeup artist on a feature film. But what I like to do as far as small films go I like to mix it up. I don't like to do just huge, big budget movies. As you've probably seen, I'd like to do a mixture. And I like doing small films. They're very, there's a lot of commitment is involved, and there are different types of challenges. But there's a real sense of doing something together. Plus, you want to give a bit back. You want to do small films and work on different things the way actors do. And often you choose a project because the subject matter grabs you, or the director is someone you've always wanted to work with, or, and you don't think, oh, this is only a $2 million budget, I've just done a Bond. You think, oh, this is great because I've just done a Bond and I'm able to afford to do something a little bit different, which is how I do theatre. I design a lot of theatre, and doing film allows me to be able to do that.
So you've created a lot of iconic looks for people like Derek Zoolander, and the opening for Spectre with the Day of the Dead. And I know in Chocolat, Juliette Binoche wanted her character to look like strawberries and cream.
My God!
What is that? I went deep dive in research because I wanted to make sure that I left no stone unturned. What I was getting at is like, where do you begin with these sort of ideas, and what is each process like in creating these looks and knowing when it looks right?
Well, a lot of it is instinct. A lot of it is I do a lot of research. So for Derek Zoolander, for the film in general, I did a lot of fashion-y type, heading down that road type of research. And Ben Stiller had a lot of ideas about everything. He was directing, he wrote it, starring in it. So we got on really, really well. And I had ideas about Derek Zoolander. I thought he should look flawless. His skin should look flawless, and he should always look like he's ready for a photo shoot or something like that. And Ben liked that. So what I do is I think about the characters a lot, and even though it was a comedy and not a realistic character, for comedies, I think reality is very important to sell the comedy. And so that's what I decided. I put, his makeup was so thick. It's probably the heaviest makeup I've ever done on a man. But it didn't actually look like a heavy makeup. It just looks like he was a bit flawless and slightly plasticky, or
just looked incredibly
bit
good
airbrushed.
Looking.
Yeah, and he is very good looking. Yeah, very, very, very good looking.
Yeah.
and so that was that. And Juliette Binoche was a character that ran a chocolate shop, who had a magical air about her, and also so beautiful. And it was set in the 50s, that film. And so I felt that she should have a touch of real glamour about her. So I cut her hair and to look like Marilyn Monroe's hair. So I did the same hairstyle. That was her glamour. And then she said, I want to look like a chocolate. And so I said, I think you should look like a strawberry cream. So I did. I thought about a strawberry cream, and I did a very pale foundation and rosy cheeks, and it was very pinky, her makeup, and gorgeous. She just looked gorgeous. She's an absolutely stunning looking woman. And that's how we did it. I made her look like strawberries and cream, and with her chocolatey hair. So, but you never know where the inspiration's going to come from. I think about things. I think about things over and over and over again, and then something will come to me, hopefully. And if it doesn't, I'll talk to the costume designer and the director. Obviously, you have to talk to the director and make sure you're doing what they want to see. But all of those places, apart from all the research you do, tons of research for Chocolat and for everything, something will come to you.
Do you have any sleepless nights when you're sort of thinking about something? It's like, oh, this doesn't work, what's missing? Missing?
Yeah, many sleepless nights, years of them. I still have sleepless nights. It's still the same. It doesn't get any easier. You still worry and you get nervous and you think, is this right? And occasionally, you're very sure about what you're doing, but you still get nervous because you've still got to sell it. You've still got to make sure the director is happy and that the actor feels right, and the costume designer thinks it's good, and the production designer and so many people involved. It's such a collaboration.
I know you worked on Cinderella, and I was watching a video where you were talking about Helen Bonham Carter's look, and you basically went for the opposite of her style is now. How difficult is it to jump on a production like Cinderella, where there has been many iterations, and you want to put your own sort of stamp on it?
Well, it had a lot going for it, Cinderella. It had well, Ken Branagh directed it, but it had Sandy Powell designing the costumes, and Carol Hemming was doing the hair on that, who's a very good friend of mine, and Sandy I knew from years ago. But Sandy is such an amazing designer, and we all sat down and talked, and we all came up with the same idea, which was to make Cinderella look like a night, like the cartoon did, which is sort of a very strong 40s feel. And then I was sort of looking at things like Gone with the Wind, that was made in the 40s, but was set, in sort of Victorian. And yet the makeup was straight 40s, and the hair, whilst ringlety, had a feel of the 40s. So I felt that Cinderella should look like a film that was made, a period film that was made in the 40s, so that you'd have that look of 40s hair and makeup and costume with influenced by the 40s, yet it was a sort of fairy tale Victorian-y crinoline type situation. We all had that idea, and that all came from going back and looking at the original cartoon.
Right, and I know on Spectre, when you were just opening scene, what was probably the most difficult part, other than looking after 1,500 people?
What, generally in the film, or that particular scene?
I think the particular scene.
That scene was huge, and because all those extras were being prepped in Mexico City, and we were shooting at Pinewood on main team, so we had to send a crew out to sort it all out and set it up, and they had 6 weeks to do all the fittings on all those extras. So they went out with a massive Bible of research that I'd done, and they went out and we talked, and so they got a sense of what I wanted, which was a mixture of some beautiful makeups, some bad makeups, some street type makeups, all different types of things with all different types of influences, because I felt it should look real. And at that point, the Day of the Dead wasn't celebrated in Mexico City. It is now because of the Bond film. Anyway, they went out, and I sent 5 makeup artists out, headed by Nikita Ray, who works with me a lot, and Zoe Tahir had sent her hairdressers out, and we had 300 hair and makeup people in a stadium, and they all spent 6 weeks doing the fittings, where they made up every single person and did their hair, and then they photographed them all. And at the end of the day at Pinewood, I'd start getting WhatsApps blasting through my phone of all the fittings they'd done for that day. And so I could see what they were doing and give notes if necessary and correct stuff or not. And I didn't actually have to do much correcting because they all looked stunning. And that's because we had a team that was made up of all Mexican makeup artists, or street painters, or artists who'd never necessarily painted a face in their lives. But because of the nature of what we were doing, it sort of worked. We had body painters, airbrushing people. It was an incredible bunch. And then when I got there to Mexico, we got to Mexico City like 2 days before we shot that scene. And it was really overwhelming to meet these people who were so committed and fantastic. And on the day, I went in and worked with the extras with them, and we got those extras out in 2 hours. And they all looked incredible because of all the work that had been done. And I was very overwhelmed, emotionally overwhelmed. I just couldn't believe it. And then we shot it, and it was a very huge, successful scene in the movie. It was the precursor to Sam's idea for 1917. So when we shot that opening sequence for Spectre, because that was ostensibly one shot that took Bond through that crowd, up the stairs, into the hotel, out of the hotel window, into a massive sequence, which then involved a building collapsing. And all of that was one shot, theoretically. And that was the precursor to Sam Mendes's idea of shooting 1917 as one shot. That's what started him down that road, I think. So that was exciting. That was a very exciting thing.
I think that's a good segue into your sort of role on 1917. So I guess we can jump back to, about June 2018, when you get sent the script. After reading it, you know it's going to be something very special.
Yeah, well, I was in Spain working on a film, and the producer of that film was Sam Mendes' producer as well. And she said, "You're going to be getting a call from Sam." And I got an email from Sam saying that he'd like to send me a script. Would I be interested? And I said, sure, because I love Sam. I just love him. So I was on without reading the script anyway. So, but I read the script, and the first thing in the script, it goes, what does it say? This film will be shot as one shot. And you think, what does that mean? I thought, what is he talking about? How does that work? I didn't know if he meant, I mean, all these things. Well, then I read the script and I loved it, obviously. And I thought, are we going to be rehearsing for 6 months, and then the day comes and we shoot all this over a 2-hour period as one shot? Rob, I thought that might be the case. And I thought, is that even possible? But anyway, that's not how we shot it at all. But I was so excited. I was also really flattered that he'd asked me. I'm so excited about it. And also, over 2 Bond films, we developed a really, really good working relationship. And there's nothing better than working with a director more than once that you have a relationship with, and you have shortcuts and a mutual trust, which is very liberating, because it means you can try stuff in a safe environment and not have them think that you've lost your mind, or because they're able to say, no, you've lost your mind, or this is great, or whatever. It's very creative when you have a relationship like that. And so, and it was on 1917. And because I had a very strong idea of how I wanted it to look, which was also how Sam wanted it to look, which was very authentic and true to how it did look, and not a romanticized idea of soldiers in World War One, but a real idea that we took from a tons of research. We all did. And Sam supplied a sort of booklet of 350 shots of soldiers, which, well, not just soldiers, but he had a book for every scene in that film. He had a reference. He had photographic reference from the war, real reference. And then I carried on doing a lot more research and a lot of reading about how they spent their day, why they did this, why they did that. And all of that information influences how you would make those soldiers look, which isn't necessarily an understanding you'd have just from looking at pictures. For instance, for instance, those soldiers, when they enlisted, they had a very short haircut, and their hair had to be so short you couldn't see it underneath their helmets. But they also buzzed off all their hair to take away their individuality. And then very slowly, they expressed themselves different ways, their individuality in different ways. And one of them was they would grow their hair on top of their head, underneath their helmets. And then they would cut their hair, a terrible fringe across their hair, so that when their helmets were on, you couldn't see any hair coming out the front, and they'd keep the back short. But when they took their helmets off, they had these ridiculous haircuts. Really weird, like this huge bobble bunch of hair on the front and at the top of their head, and no hair up the back. And they were so weird, these haircuts, that you don't know why they're like that until you understand this. And this was their way of expressing themselves. So I made sure that we had a load of those haircuts in, and they're very specific haircuts in World War One, as World War II haircuts were, and they were also very different to that. So all those things that you find out, like they had so much meat, tinned meat in their rations. They had so much meat that it caused boils on the back of their necks.
Oh.
Yes, so there were boils on the backs of some of their necks. Things like that, little things. They smoked like chimneys. Their teeth were so rotten, and it was a very tough time. Very tough time. Obviously, it was a horrendous time for them, and because of all the research we did, it was very, very important to me that we honoured those soldiers that fought in the war. And the way I honoured them was to be as true to life as I possibly could.
What did you look at specifically research-wise?
Well, it's a huge amount. I looked at the Imperial War Museum. I went to the Imperial War Museum and looked at their World War One stuff, and then bought all the books that they had in their bookshop and all the documentaries that they had. And then we also had a historian, a World War One historian with us. I spent a lot of time talking to him. And then you read a lot, and there were things I had to do. It was scripted that there was a soldier with tattoos on his forearms. And it's very hard to find, that was hard to find photographic reference of World War One tattoos. But I eventually found this tattooist who worked at Waterloo Station, who tattooed all the boys as they got on the train, or just before they got on the train to go off to France or wherever. And so I found his book, and then I had a name, so I was able to research some of his stuff. But in my research, I found this tattoo museum in Liverpool. So I rang them up and I said, do you have any research from this tattooist? And they had said, we have all of his machines and we have all of his artwork. We bought it all somewhere, I don't know where. So it was like a miracle. Wow. It was so random that happened. So I said, can you help me design an accurate tattoo? Because these guys were World War One buffs. So I had to give all this information, how old the soldier was, where he lived, what his regiment was, all of this information. The stuff about his background and where he lived, I made that up. And the regiment, everyone had their regiment names. And it took ages because if you don't work in the film industry, you don't really realize the urgency of time. So it was literally down to the wire. I think it was about 3 days before we shot, and I'd given them a 2-month lead in. So, but finally, this artwork arrived. It was so beautiful. God, it was good. It was really something. And then I had to have it made into tattoos, which I did, and we just made it. They went on the day, skin of our teeth. So things like that. And then in the end, you just get a flash of them. You'd miss them if you didn't know they were there. But it's things like my friend Bob, who's a theatre designer, said, you might not see things, but you can sense them. And I think that you can sense the detail that this entire crew went to make that film work so well.
Before we get into the sort of production part of it, during rehearsals, how involved were you in the sort of process, and how difficult was it to know that if you're going to do shots for 8 to 10 minutes or so, if the makeup won't need sort of like a touch up halfway through? Well,
first of all, very very involved with the rehearsal process. I had a 16-week prep, the film, which is longer than the film, and it was a very collaborative experience for all of us. Every department was involved with every other department, and there was always a knock-on effect. I was very involved with set dressing because they needed hair in the barbed wire fence, or bodies that were hanging over the fence, or bits of limbs that Tristan, this prosthetic designer, made. It was all very carefully worked out in advance. We knew exactly how many bodies were needed, all of that stuff. And so we were in and out of the art department, which one is, but things like I had to match the dirt on the soldiers to the earth in the trenches where we were shooting that particular sequence. So Bovingdon, where we shot the first lot, was very yellowy dirt, clayey dirt. And then Salisbury Plain was browner, and then we had chalk and all of that stuff. So I had to get the art department on location. I had to get locations to send me dirt samples from all the places that we were shooting so that I could make the dirt to match. And so during the rehearsal, it was, we were all involved. When Sam had rehearsed the actors and got to the point where they were sort of ready, he called all the HODs in, and we all watched the rehearsals. And we all knew everything that was going on in every single scene way before we shot it. So there were no surprises. We all knew everything. It was a massive collaboration and a huge sharing of information. There was no hierarchy. There was no, oh, you can't see that. It was completely open. And Sam was completely accessible if you had any questions, which we did because we had to be so prepared. But as far as touch-ups were concerned on actors, we didn't do touch-ups because, I mean, we did, but it was very minimal because they're supposed to be covered in mud and shit and look really rough. And so I like to let people go in those situations. So you get them ready in the morning and you're matching the scene that we shot before, and you've got to go through a blend. So the continuity is very important. But once they start that sequence, there's nothing to match to. It's an 8-minute sequence, and whatever happens in that sequence happens. And because we were basically shooting in sequence, it didn't matter. So it wasn't like you could cut because someone's sweat wasn't dripping at the right angle, or the sweat had made them look more mucky and needed cleaning up. All of that enhanced the look of the person. So that was easy, that bit. What wasn't easy were things like when Blake gets stabbed and you've got blood pouring out, and then you have to go back and we have to reset all of that. And that was a remote controlled blood pump. Things like that were tricky.
I was going to talk about that plane crash scene because you see a lot of colour leaving his face once he's stabbed. Was that done in post, or was that a makeup thing?
It was a bit of both. It was initially for that scene when the plane comes in, because we've been at rehearsals and because we knew the camera angles of that shot. We knew the camera angle. We actually knew the camera angles for the entire film way before we started shooting. So we'd have the perimeters of the shot, the size that the actors were in frame, and so we would know if we could get away with something, possibly. So in that sequence, the shot starts on George pumping water into his helmet. Can you believe I know this a year later? It's exactly a year ago. The shot began with George pumping water into his helmet to take over to the German pilot who'd been on fire. So he turns around, and in the distance, you see the German pilot stab Blake. But it's quite a long shot. And then we're with George behind him as he starts running towards Blake. By the time he gets to Blake and you're in a sort of mid-shot of Blake, he's very pale because he's already lost a lot of blood. And that happens very fast when you physically lose blood. You do go pale very fast. So we could set Blake's makeup from the top of the scene to be quite pale because I knew we would never get in tight enough for that to register until it was relevant that he was pale. So that's how we got away with that. So then they shoot the scene and then he dies. And then the next shot, he is being dragged across. He's dead and he's being dragged across and he looks pretty grey at that point. And that's because we'd cut and there was a blend point. So we were able to take him even paler. And that was enhanced, I think, a little bit by visual effects as well. But a lot of it we were able to do because of careful planning.
Yeah, because it was interesting to sort of see how it all worked as well when you have something where it doesn't really cut. As you said, so much planning must have gone into it. Be like, cool, we can get away with doing this, that, the other, and then coming in and out. There's another scene that I want to talk about, and that's the bit when they're in the trench and it blows up. Because
the German trench.
Yeah. And what's the sort of difficulties of that, where you're going from they're all sort of muddied up, normal looking, to they're covered in bricks and dust and everything?
Well, that was difficult because that was our weather cover and that was the one scene we shot out of sequence. And it was the biggest scene as far as changing the change that took place in their appearance because they got buried. And George in particular got buried. And of course, that's the scene that was shot out of sequence. So what we did, because we shot them coming out of the bunker way before we ever shot the scene where they are actually in the bunker. So we rehearsed it. What we did was Dom Tui, the special effects supervisor, had designed a rig for George to get buried in. And what we did it for real. We put him in this pile of rocks and covered him in dust and rubble. And we did it for the exact time. We kept him in there for the time it would take for Blake to react to that and pull him out. And so we filmed it, we shot it, we did everything for reference. So we had all the reference of George looking the way he would, having come out of that explosion, because we did it for real beforehand, which we had to do. Otherwise, we never would have had accurate continuity. So it worked. And that was the level of prep that we were doing for that film, that we were able to do that and have reference as to how George looked. And we pulled it off. It worked.
You got awards nominations as well, BAFTAs and Oscars. What was that like, getting those nominations? And do you remember where you were when you found out that you were nominated?
Which ones are you talking about? Are you talking about 1917?
1917, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
When I found out about my BAFTA nomination, I can't remember where I was. I can remember when I found out. I can't remember where I was for the BAFTA. I can't remember. But when when the Oscar nominations were coming out, I think we were prepping Batman. Were we prepping Batman? Yeah, we were. And I was on my way to the dentist because I had a terrible toothache. Anyway, before that, before the Oscar nominations came out, I'd been contacted by a BBC radio show who said, look, we want to get, if you get nominated, we want to get your reaction. And so will you be on our radio show so we can get your reaction when you're nominated? So I said, yes, but what if I'm not nominated? And they said, well, goodbye, we won't be speaking to you then. So that's nice, very nice. Anyway, that was because I'd already been nominated for a BAFTA, so that's why I thought there was a possibility. So anyway, meanwhile, I'm on my way to the dentist with a raging toothache for an emergency procedure. And meanwhile, I'm driving to town, and I know that the nominations are coming up. So my entire department are listening live, and then they're all sort of texting me, you're not up yet. And then suddenly the phone rings, and it's my agent, and she goes, "Hey, congratulations, you've got a nomination." I'm going, "Oh, thank you." I could hardly speak. And I was in the car up in Marylebone in Wimpole Street outside my dentist when my agent rang. And then I walk into the dentist. I'd forgotten all about the radio show, and suddenly the radio show rings, and then they go, "Congratulations, how do you feel?" I said, "I feel like shit, my tooth's killing me, I'm on my way to the dentist." And then I was beside myself, so I went staggering into the dentist. I went, "Guess what?" to my dentist. And it was so exciting. I was beside myself because I was also beside myself for a BAFTA, because they mean different things, I think, BAFTAs and Oscars. And I think what was so incredible about getting those nominations, both of them, was that they were for a film that I had such strong feelings for. I loved that film, everything about it. So it was the perfect ending for me.
There's two questions I have. Would you say that was probably the best project you've worked on?
Well, I probably am tempted to say yes, but I've worked on a lot of fantastic projects. You know, the Bonds are incredible, and the Royal Tenenbaums, Zoolander, Charlie Kaufman's first film he ever directed, and they were all incredible for different reasons, but that film was really incredible because of the commitment that the crew had to it, and I'd never come across that before. Not that commitment that was unconditional. And then the end result was so good, as are a lot of films I've worked on, but that was certainly because of the crew and because of Sam, as well as the actors and the quality of the content. Yes, it was one of the greatest experiences of my career, definitely.
I was talking to Dom Tui about when he got his Oscar nomination, and he said they had to do some sort of like a pitch for it, because when there's 10 nominees,
you do.
Did you have to do that as well?
Yeah, you have to do that. Makeup have to do that, and Dom had to do it. And I don't think anyone else has to do it. And I think it's because it's a fine line often with makeup and special effects. What is a makeup and what is enhanced by visual effects, CGI? And same with Dom. You know, did he physically create those explosions, or were they enhanced? And I think you have to explain that to people. And that's why you have to go to a bake-off. It's called a bake-off. And you have to present a short film, a 10-minute cut of your makeups in the film. And then you have to stand before the entire hair and makeup chapter of the Academy worldwide, because you're on camera as well as being in front of an audience. And you have to sell your work, really, to get a vote, with an idea that you'll get a vote. But there was a lot of affection for our film. A lot of people loved that film. And because you're addressing professional people who do the same job as you, they understood the problems. And I think a lot of that had to do with our nomination.
In your bake-off, how long was the sort of, is it a half-hour sort of presentation, or is it
it's not that long. It's your film, your film runs for 10 minutes, and then you go up on stage, and I expect you're on stage for about 15 minutes. I was on stage with Tristan Vest-Luis, who did the prosthetics on the film, and also Rebecca Cole was also nominated, who made up George Mackay, but she couldn't go because she was pregnant. So it's quite nerve-wracking doing those bake-offs. I'd done one before and no one asked me any questions, and it was completely demoralizing.
What do you mean? Like, so you basically were done, and it's like, any questions, and it was just like, no, moving on.
Showed my 10-minute clip, which was for, I don't know if you ever saw this film called Synecdoche, New York, which was.
Is that with?
I would expect you. Yes, it was. I would have expected you to watch that film, actually. And if you haven't, you should.
I've got it recorded somewhere. Is that the one with Philip Seymour Hoffman?
Yeah. We had to age him from 38 to 90, along with all the people in his life. And Mike Marino did that, who I have a long work. That was my first time I'd worked with him, and his makeups were unbelievably good. And apart from that, we had so much other makeup in there. So, like, tons and tons of tattoos and effects and this and that. And we ran the film, and then Mike Marino and I got up, and no one asked us a question. Not one bloody question with all that makeup in there. We were sort of blanks. But anyway, made up for it.
Fair enough. That's I don't need to laugh. It's just more like
yeah, it's really.
You have a bit of, like, you have your pitch and you have everything, and you're kind of expecting.
Yeah, nothing happens.
Yeah, and you're just like, oh, okay, I'll see myself off. I know that you spent some time out in New York.
22 years.
22 years. What was the idea behind the move there?
A bit personal.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was more work-wise sort of thing. Apologies.
It was a bit of both. I moved to New York to live with my boyfriend, and also at the same time I was getting work requests from people in New York. So I moved out for him, but at the same time I joined the union. I started working in New York and LA. I started getting a reputation for doing beauty work on women, and so I went out to the States to work with Michelle Pfeiffer, and then lots of other people started getting in touch with me. They saw the work I'd done on her, and so I had Melanie Griffith. I worked with her for a long time, Winona Ryder, various people. And then I was sort of preferred to design I liked working with all those people, but I liked designing the entire film. And it was a time in New York that was really busy and interesting. There was a lot of films being made there. So I was able to work on some really fantastic things. It was very exciting. Hard work though.
What's the sort of biggest difference that you had with working in the UK and in America?
It's the hours that they work. It's very different. It's shocking, actually, because you would go in. The last film I did there was The Dictator with Sacha Baron Cohen, which is a very memorable experience and quite demanding. And I love working with Sacha. I just thought he was fantastic. I loved it. But the hours, we had huge, massive makeups. His makeup was quite a big deal, but we'd start work, usually 5:30 or 6, and at 11 o'clock at night, you're still shooting and starting a new setup, and you couldn't stop them. And I'd go to the producers. I've been here for 17 hours. I can't do another. We can't shoot. And so my crew, we've got to wrap, and no one wraps because they pay a lot more money in the States than they do in the UK, and they just feel that they own you, and that they just keep going on and on and on. So when I came back to the UK, and the first thing I did, I think, was Quantum of Solace. I came back and did a Bond, and at 6 o'clock we'd wrap. And if we went over, someone had to ask the crew if they minded going over. And I said, what's going on? What is going on? It's only 6 o'clock and they're asking us. And then they'd say no. That would never happen in the States. So the biggest difference are the work conditions, actually, are phenomenally different. And it's so much nice. I know American directors can't quite believe that we wrap at 6 here in the UK when they're used to working. They don't want to stop. Most directors want to keep going and get their work done and keep going, and they're all fired up. But the crews are hanging in rags, and it's really tough. It's really tough. So I'm quite happy to come back to the UK and work here. I think that you're really valued. What I do is valued, it seems, a bit more than in the States, possibly.
Because whilst you were out in the States as well, you were designing for directors like Wes Anderson, Charlie Kaufman, as you mentioned. What was it like working with them and sort of getting around those sort of more sort of, I say this in sort of air quotes, but more sort of wackier and niche ideas compared to sort of like a traditional film?
Well, Charlie had never directed before. He'd only written, and it was his first film, and he was quite challenged by it in a way. I mean, I think he did a great job. I think because he wrote it, he knew exactly what he wanted from the actors. It was a very unusual film, and I think it was sort of a masterpiece in many ways. He's really a phenomenal writer. He's also a lovely, gorgeous person, lovely, kind, gentle person, and he was an absolute pleasure to work with, and you just wanted to do so well by him. And then it's sort of a privilege to work with Charlie Kaufman. He's a legend, And so that was good. And he wasn't experienced, so we had to tell him, explain things, how things worked. And he would do things like, one day we were shooting a monologue of a priest by a graveside. And he came to work and he went, no, this writing isn't good enough. I need half an hour. And he went off to his train and we all waited for him. And he came out with this monologue that was so brilliant. And when you read it and when he delivered it, it was one of those moments where you see something so great, it feels like your life has shifted slightly because something has clicked in your brain that you acknowledge. It was just incredible. And so that's the type of thing you get from working with directors like Charlie Kaufman and Wes. Working with Wes, because he designs everything himself. He designs the sets, the costumes. They all come from an idea of everything you see on that screen has come from Wes. So that when I went to meet him and talk about the project, he had designed all the hair and makeup for every single character in a little line drawing, like a little cartoon that he'd done on Post-its. So he would just give me a pile of Post-its and he'd go, oh, this is Gwyneth's look. This is Gene Hackman. I want him to look like this. And it was a line drawing. And I reproduced his drawings on those characters. And that has its own challenge, but is also really exciting because when you pull it off and they all look like those little line drawings, you think, God, this is brilliant. It's so exciting. It's a different way of working, but great, really great.
I want to go back as well because you were saying you're working with cast rather than designing. What did you find was the most important thing in building a relationship with these cast members and for them to sort of trust you in helping them develop their character?
Well, I think the first thing is to remember is that actors have to have really good actors have to have a lot of courage. And I think people underestimate actors and what they have to go through and the vulnerabilities that they have to expose, the rawness they have to expose, and where they have to go within themselves to be able to achieve their performances. Even if they're funny performances, it can sometimes come from a painful place. So I think the first thing is that you have to really respect them and be there for them and know that let them know you're there for them, and not just in visually creating their character, but also as a massive support system when they need it. Because I've caught many an actor at the end of a very difficult scene. I've caught them before they fell emotionally, just picked them up and had to comfort them, because it's difficult what they do. And I think what you need to remember from all of this is what it takes an actor to come up with a performance. But, I've worked with actors like Daniel Day-Lewis and Stephen Ray and really Gene Hackman, or, I've just worked with Ben Stiller even. There's some amazing performers. I'm very privileged. And I've always been so impressed by the courage it takes, even for Zoolander. He's putting himself out there to look like a complete idiot. It has to take a certain amount of courage to do that, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it does. You're just putting yourself out there and making yourself convincing as that character, especially with somebody like Zoolander, where if it is in the hands of somebody else, it could be completely awful.
It could. And I just think that film, Zoolander 1, worked so well because you felt so much for him. Even though it was a ridiculous character, he played it with such empathy so that you could relate to everything he was going through, even though it was ridiculous. And I think that's why that film worked so well. You really cared about him in the end.
Whilst you're working with cast members, because I know you said before that you have designers sort of giving you what they sort of want to look like. I guess in the collaboration process with a designer whilst you're looking after a cast, what is the sort of biggest hurdle that you have to sort of overcome?
Do you mean when I'm looking after one actor in someone else's film? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yes.
And so what's the biggest hurdle with a makeup designer?
Yeah.
I don't think there is a hurdle. I think there's a hurdle if you don't work together. That if you go in with an idea that bears nothing to do with the film and try and fight for that would be very difficult and not inclusive or collaborative. So the biggest hurdle for me isn't that. It's because I'm always going to be collaborative with a designer. It's just, I always think, I'm always insecure. I always think, oh God, this is such a good designer. They're going to find out that I'm terrible. They're finally going to someone's actually going to find out the truth about me, that I'm just a bit of powder and a lot of bullshit. And that's it. That's my biggest hurdle, so that someone might find out the truth.
With all your years of experience, what's the sort of unexpected things that have happened whilst you've been on set or whilst prepping for a job?
That's a very difficult question. And I don't know if I can answer that without a lot of thought. I don't know. I mean, things have happened to me. Some pretty terrible things have happened to me personally during a shoot that were a bit unexpected. Like, should I tell you one?
It's only if you feel comfortable talking about
it. Like I was on a Bond film in the 80s. I think it was License to Kill. Or was it Living Daylight? Anyway, I was on a Bond film and I wasn't designing it. George Frost was designing it. And he goes, "Oh, Naomi, could you go and check those 200 men on camels that we'd put beards on?" Were they on camels or horses? Horses. We'd put beards on all of these people that were held on with a piece of elastic. Can you go and check that all their beards are attached? So I went, all right. So I'm walking through the desert in a pair of trousers with braces and a scarf wrapped around. I was very young and skinny, and a scarf wrapped around my bosoms. And my arms are in the air, and I'm checking all these, and my back's to the crew, and I'm checking all these camel drivers and their beards. And I thought, God, they're so well behaved, these guys. And then I realized that my scarf had fallen down and I completely topless while checking all these people. Things like that.
I don't need to laugh.
So things like that are challenging and unexpected. But things are always happening. People start sweating, they start crying when you don't expect it, things like that. But I can't think of something specific right now.
No, that's fine. I think that was it. I shouldn't be laughing, but because
no, it's a funny story.
I know Ash has said something similar where when he turned up to his first day in sort of like a shirt and jeans, and the advice that he got given was make sure you get some waterproofs and some comfortable walking boots because you're going to be on your feet all day.
Yeah.
He's taking that with him. I want to sort of move away from the film and TV because I know you have your own YouTube channel called Makeup Stories. And I kind of want to know where you got the idea to set that up.
Well, I wanted to do something for women who are slightly older than the usual YouTube makeup tutorials, which are on mostly young girls who are stunning and beautiful and, you know, you can't go too wrong. I wanted to address the idea of women who are a bit older and over 40 mostly, at least. I mean, Naomi Harris was the youngest person. I just wanted to make people realize that it doesn't matter if you're over 40 or 50. You still have a beauty. You still can be stunning. There's no reason not to be. And the aging process in itself can be stunning. And I just, you know, when you get to that type of age, you suddenly feel, you can start to feel invisible. You feel invisible because you're not filling the norm of young, gorgeous, hot chicks anymore that maybe you once were. And, you know, you have to address yourself in a different way. And so I just wanted to think about that and talk about that and make some people up who I felt could possibly look better than they were looking, or that looked good, and I could show other women that you can look good. Don't give up. You know, you are still beautiful and you should be out there. And so I did. I started with Naomi Harris, who I'd worked with on Bond, we've become friends, and Ruby Wax, who's an ancient friend. She's not ancient, but a very old, most of my life we've been friends. And Harriet Thorpe, who I sort of had an angle with all of them. And with Harriet, I'm always yelling at her. These are all friends of mine. I'm always yelling at her that she's got too much makeup on. And I wanted her to see how gorgeous she could look with a lot less. Because I think when you're wearing a huge amount of makeup on a regular basis, you're hiding something, or you're using it as a piece of armor or defense against something, insecurity or whatever. It's interesting with makeup, how people use it to present something about themselves that isn't necessarily the truth. And then with Jennifer Saunders, she turned up with no makeup on, and her hair was a wreck. And, you know, it was interesting. I've made up Jen millions of times, and she's so beautiful and has remained so through the years. And I just wanted for people to see that it doesn't take much to transform yourself. And then the last person I worked with was my friend Amanda, who was dying of cancer, and she had no hair, she had nothing, and her son was getting bar mitzvahed, and she desperately wanted to look good for his bar mitzvah. And so she asked me to get her ready, and I said, can I film it for my channel? And she said yes. She was really brave. And at that point, I wanted to show people that, you know, you can go through all of that hell of chemo and radiation and misery from it all. I mean, her nails were falling off from the chemo, and I've never seen that before. And I just believe if you feel good about yourself, it will give you a bit more strength to carry on fighting. And I work a lot with people who are going through chemo. I've worked a lot in my life with people like that, and a lot of it is because I think if you feel that you look good, you're going to feel good. And with her, it's her son's bar mitzvah, so we got her a wig, and I made her up on camera, and it was an absolute gobsmacking transformation. And she sailed out of there feeling $1 million. And on the morning of the bar mitzvah, which I didn't film, I went to make her up at her house really early in the morning, and she was really ill, and we got through it, and she got through the service. And then the next day was the big party, so I went back, and I was going as well. I was at the bar mitzvah too, and I went back to her house and got her ready into her evening dress, and she was so ill. But the minute I made her up, she rallied, she got her dress on, she got in the car, and she got to the bar mitzvah, and she danced with her son. And that night she went into hospital, and then she died 2 weeks later. But she made it to the bar mitzvah, and that's what she wanted to do. And after that, I stopped making my YouTube channel because that to me, I wanted to sort of reboot and think about what I wanted to do with that channel. So I went off in September, and I went and did a camouflage, it's called skin camouflage.
I've had that done.
Yeah, and it was a 4-day course, and it was to learn how to cover birthmarks or help people who've been through chemo or stuff that I'd done a lot in the past, but it was a whole different approach. It was a much more medical approach, and not the way you're dealing with actors. You're dealing with people who have suffered a lot, and it was an incredible course. And I wasn't sure I'd pass it because, although I'm very experienced in makeup, my attitude wasn't quite right, because we were doing our exams. We were doing our practical exams, and I'd finished covering up someone's strawberry birthmark. I went, "Okay, guys, next victim," and they went,
I should be laughing.
And they went, "Mary," and I went, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just so used to talking to actors," and I thought I failed my exam, but I didn't. I passed. And then that was great, and I'm qualified and I'm registered now, and so I can go and do that. And I managed to do one patient before we shut down, and I couldn't do it anymore. But when this is all over, that will be my YouTube channel. Will be showing people who think or have some kind of issue how you can deal with it, emphasize your other things, and get on with your life, and help, or allow this to help you get on with your life. And that's what I want to do.
Because I've got a strawberry birthmark on my neck and a bit on my cheek.
I know you do.
And
haven't we talked about this? Have I talked to you about that?
Maybe, but I might as well repeat it just in case you need a guest on your show to cover up.
Definitely, you can be a guest.
But for me, I think because I came of it as an age where, I guess it never really bothered me, but you can kind of see that there is a place for that on YouTube, where actually, you're right, the people who do the makeup tutorials are sort of younger and prettier, but I think having something like a camouflage channel will encourage people more, and not to be like, well, that shouldn't stop you from making yourself feel good, or worry about the scars or birthmark or anything. Because for me, it hasn't bothered me. People do say that odd thing. They say I've got like a love bite on my neck or something like that. But then for me, because this happened so many times, I'm not really bothered. And with quick wit, you usually shut them down quite quickly. Other than that, it'll be quite nice for someone who is younger than me to sort of have that encouragement to have a look at something like that.
But if that birthmark was all over your face, you would feel differently about it.
Yeah, more than likely, yeah. If it was like over my eye, and I know it was difficult when I was a little bit younger because I had laser treatment, so it would emphasize it a bit more and it would pop out a bit more. But once I sort of got older, it didn't really affect me as much. But then again, it's different for each person. Each person has to deal with it differently, and people can react to it differently.
Yeah. But it could also, if it did bother you, you could fix that in 5 minutes. It's quite incredible the amount of makeup that's very pigmented that you could put on something like that and cover it really, really quickly and invisibly. Because when I lived in New York, I started work. I got burnt badly on an airplane, and I went to the burns unit at Cornell, and the professor there said, "Oh, you're a makeup artist. Would you be interested in coming to work here once a week and have a clinic here and help me cover up burn scars?" And I said, "Yes, I would love to." I wasn't working at the time. I was in between jobs. So I set up a clinic, and they were all African Americans who had been burnt and lost the pigment in their skin. And it caused a lot of the women were devastated by this. And in fact, it took seconds, really, hardly any time, to cover that and give them the pigment back with makeup, slam on some lipstick, and they would come in with their heads hiding their faces, and they'd walk out with their heads up, so happy. And it was so easy. It took 2 minutes to change their lives. And it was that started me wanting to pursue this as possibly my next career, or in tandem with my present career. But because something that simple can make a huge difference to someone's lives.
I do have a final question to do with what is the one item that you have in your makeup bag?
I would say my grease paint palette that I trained with all those years ago at the BBC. It's a palette which has 12, or you can have more, colours. And they're grease paints, so you can move them around the face. And we were trained out of that. So you can do anything from that grease paint palette. You can do wounds, bruising, you could do a beauty makeup, you could do anything. And because that was the basis of our training, it was an incredible basis, because anything after that was just a bonus. So that's the one product I still have in my kit that I had the first day I ever started training as a makeup artist.
So if I were to come onto set now, you'd still have that same one in your bag?
It's not the actual same palette.
Okay, sorry.
No, because that would be 40 years old, and even I have my limits.
Oh, okay. So,
but it looks like the same palette because they still make it. Is it exactly the same palette as the one I had 40 years ago? I just renew it now and again because you don't want to kill off half your actors with some kind of terrible disease.
I also like to end the podcast with letting the guests ask me 2 questions. And I know that's so I'm giving the floor to you now and letting you have free reign.
Are you finding these podcasts are improving your idea of what you want to do within this industry, or changing your idea? Or do you think you have a new appreciation as someone who works in this industry of what other people do?
It's a bit of both. I think you get a newfound appreciation for what people do, because even though you know somebody's job title, you don't know what their day-to-day sort of role is, and how much work they need to put into what they're doing, and how much sort of like sacrifice they need to make in terms of time and energy into a project to making it look good. Being in an office, it's slightly different. It's a different environment than being on set, and learning what people do, is inspiring as well, because you know how much hard work goes into everything. And I want people to sort of listen to these podcasts and be like, oh, maybe I could do that, or maybe I could do this, or, oh, okay, so this is what it's going to take for me to be the best. This is what's going to take me if I want to be, for example, a makeup designer. Somebody says that you need to constantly be learning. Your skills need to be up to scratch. You need to not just be passionate. You need to know what you're doing. And it's not just about makeup as well. It's about the connections that you have with an actor. It's about the collaborative process in making something work. And does it want me to change what I'm doing at the moment? Maybe. I think I take it by a project basis. I think there's a lot to learn when you're working on different projects, and it's important to sort of take things from it. With knowing what to do, it's hard to sort of predict, because it's an ever-changing landscape, and at the moment as well, where everything's shut down, everything's kind of put on hold, so you kind of do rethink what you want to do. Hopefully that all makes sense.
Yeah, you're very good at this. Thank you very much for interviewing me.
No problem. Thank you very much.
I hope I wasn't boring.
No, you were fine. I feel like I might need you to get on again, because I might have some follow-up questions when I look at other projects. But again, it's just like a project that's going to be like a work in progress. And I know that I'll be, if an hour later or something, I will probably think, I should have followed that up. I should have asked this.
But you can always do that if you want.
Yeah, I will. And I will. I'll chase you up on it just in case. And yeah, let me know if you need anybody for some camouflaging.
I will, actually. I probably will use you on my next YouTube.
Just let me know. Give me a time, date, place,
all right,
and I'll be there.
But it will have to be when I'm allowed to touch you again, sometime in the future.
Don't worry.
I mean, touch you in the makeup sense of the word, Rob.
It's okay. I'm not going there. No comment. I don't want somebody from work hearing this and thinking, assuming the worst of us. So,
do you need to finish up with saying thank you very much, Naomi?
I wanted to have a quick sip of water, because you took my breath away with that comment. Thank you very much, Naomi, for your time. I much appreciate it. And it's been very interesting, and you have not been boring.
Thank you. Nor of you. Thank you very much, Rob.
No problem. Thank you very much. You take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And tune in next week, where Environmental and Clearance Coordinator Ash Gadby joins us to talk about his journey in the industry.